Hello everyone, and a very warm welcome to today's webinar, which is all about automatic enrolment in Sage Payroll. My name is Sarah and I will be hosting and presenting today's webinar, but I am joined in the background by some colleagues who are ready and waiting to answer your questions. So here is what we'll be covering. So first we'll look at the auto enrolment criteria and what that might mean for your business. We'll then move into a demo on the My Future Fund pension and we'll see a bit of how it works in the software. And then we'll look at some answers to the most common questions that we are getting around auto enrolment. And then last but not least, we will finish up with some further support and plenty of time for questions as well. So with all of that said, let's start with our introduction to automatic enrolment. So auto-enrolment is Ireland's new retirement savings scheme. It's designed to help employees build a pension pot, and this is going to come into place on the 1st of January 2026, and it'll run under the name My Future Fund. Employees will contribute a set percentage of their gross salary. Employers will match that contribution, and then the state will add a top-up as well. Now, the goal of all this, it really is just to make saving for retirement a bit easier and more accessible. And it also simplifies the process for you as a business to offer your employees a workplace pension. Now, the scheme will operate under the branding My Future Fund, and it is managed by NERSA, and that just stands for the National Automatic Enrolment Retirement Savings Authority. So the part they'll play, they'll oversee enrolment, contributions, investment and communication. And just like any existing pension schemes, NERSA will be supervised by the Pensions Authority when it all launches in January 26 as well. Now you might be wondering who is actually eligible for auto-enrolment. So this is just a bit about who is actually going to qualify. So to actually be automatically enrolled into My Future Fund, employees must be aged between 23 to 60. They have to earn over €20,000 annually. And they have to not already be in the pension scheme as well. Now, if they're outside of those age brackets or maybe not quite earning enough, they can still opt in voluntarily if they want to. And something else I do want to note is if an employee has multiple jobs, it is actually their combined earnings that can make them eligible. So even if their earnings with you are below €20,000, they can be enrolled by any employer when they're not already in a pension scheme, remember. So it is combined earnings that NERSA will check for eligibility. Now, bearing that in mind, as eligibility is based on earnings, things like contract type or length, or if you've got any seasonal workers or part-time staff maybe, all of those staff will be considered. So it will all be based on earnings, contract type or length won't come into play here. So with that said, if an employee is auto-enrolled into My Future Fund, here's a little bit about how the contributions will work. So contribution rates are fixed and there's no changes at all allowed to these rates. So employees and employers will each pay the same amount. And then instead of tax relief, the state will then add a top-up. Now, to ease the cost, contributions will gradually increase over the first 10 years of the scheme. So you can see on the graph on the slide there, they start at 1.5%. for both employee and employer, and then they'll increase 1.5% every 3 years. Now that means by the 10th year, both employee and employer will pay 6%, and the state will add a 2% top-up. So if you look at the total contributions over time, they're going to go from 3.5% to 14% in that 10-year timeline. Now, something just to bear in mind is if someone joins your company, say in year 8, of this scheme, they would start at that 4.5% rate. So it is based on the scheme's timeline, not their career timeline. So that is something to bear in mind. Another couple of bits just to consider as an employer is your contributions will be based on gross pay. So that includes things like bonuses, overtime, but they will be deducted from the net pay. Now, if you do have any higher earners, there is a cap on contributions as well, and that is earnings up to €80,000. So if they do earn more than €80,000, contributions will stop and then reset each year. So that is one to watch out for if you do have any higher earners on the payroll. Now, NERSA will use revenue payroll data to actually identify your eligible employees. So this is called the 13-week look back period. So they'll look back 13 weeks, and if that look back shows that the employee would earn over the €20,000 annually, then they'll be auto-enrolled into My Future Fund. And they'll stay enrolled even if their earnings then later drop. Now, you might be thinking, why that 13-week look back period? And it's just there to ensure fair assessment and just means that if anyone has any short-term changes in pay, it's going to prevent it from affecting their eligibility. And remember, just another point, I did touch on this a little bit earlier, is the look back does cover all employments, not just yours. So previous earnings with another employer will still count towards that threshold. So if an employee is auto-enrolled into My Future Fund, they are going to have some choices when it comes to that enrolment. First, employees can choose to opt out of the scheme, but that is only in months 7 and 8 after enrolment. Now, if they do choose to opt out, it is only their own contributions that are refunded back to them. Employer and state contributions will remain invested. So only refund is for the employee side. Employer and state refunds, they will stay invested into the pension pot. So no refunds for employer or state with that one. Now, second thing they might choose to do, they can choose to suspend their contributions, and that is for either 1 or 2 years. Now, during that time, all contributions, so that is employee, employer, and state, all of those contributions will stop. Now, with the suspension option, there are no refunds, so no refunds at all involved with this one. And contributions can only restart after at least 1 year. So if they do choose to go down the route of suspending the contributions, the earliest they can go back in is after that year period. Last but not least, so employees who do choose to opt out will be automatically enrolled after 2 years. So this re-enrollment will only apply if they still meet the eligibility criteria, of course. And this just prevents employees forgetting to rejoin the scheme. Now, it might be that they still do want to opt out. And if they do, that is absolutely fine. All they would do is if they got re-enrolled, they would opt out again through the employee online portal. And then you, as an employer, will receive an updated EEPN notice to then stop the contributions. So they do have a few different choices here. These options are there to just give employees that little bit of flexibility when it comes to automatic enrolment. Now, you might have just heard me mention an online portal. So that brings us on nicely to the next slide, which is all about the pensions online portal. Now, NERSA have now launched a secure portal for My Future Fund, and this went live on the 1st of December. So the portal is accessible to both employers and employees. But as an employer, the action you need to take now, you will need to complete your profile and set up direct debit to ensure your contributions transfer smoothly. Now you'll log in using your existing ROS certificate details, and there are further details on the website on how to complete registration. So I have included a link on the handout which will direct you to the My Future Fund portal. So if you haven't already set this up, follow the link and please ensure that is done in good time for January. If you register and complete all of those steps early, it is really going to help you stay compliant and avoid any penalties. So you do want to get that done in good time for January. Now, from an employee side of things, they'll also be able to access the portal, and they'll access that using the MyGov ID. So from an employee side, they'll be able to view balances, contributions, investment returns. They can update any of their details or pause payments if they want to as well. So they'll be able to control their side of things and the different options that they have when it comes to auto enrolment through the portal also. So I do just want to recap a few of the key points. So remember, it is mandatory for eligible employees to be auto-enrolled unless they opt out. But of course, that is only in months 7 and 8 that they can do that. And remember, those eligible employees are going to be aged between 23 and 60, going to be earning above the €20,000 gross pay per year, and they have to not currently be paying into a pension scheme. Remember, there's an €80,000 cap for the gross pay, and it'll be calculated on gross and deducted from net. So again, this slide is just here for your quick reference. But now let's move on to see how all of this is going to look in your payroll. So what I'm going to do before we jump into the demo is I want to run through the key steps of the process. And then we'll look at a video of a product demonstration of how auto-enrollment is going to integrate into your payroll processing going forward in 2026. So these are the 6 key steps. So first, the nurse will use the 13-week look-back period to identify those eligible employees. And they'll look at the payroll data that you've submitted to revenue to do that. They'll then send you, the employer, an APN through the software, and that just stands for Automatic Enrolment Payroll Notification. You'll then retrieve this, and payroll will apply the APN to the relevant employees. You'll then just continue processing the payroll as normal, and once everything is done and dusted, you'll then submit the contribution details over to NERSA. NERSA will then collect the contribution, usually through the direct debit that you'll have set up on the online portal. And then finally, they'll then proceed with investing the contribution. So that's what the new process will look like in a nutshell. There's obviously a few of those steps will be happening behind the scenes, but we will be bringing that to life in the product demonstration. So I'm just going to bring the slides down and let's take a look at how all of this is going to look in your payroll. So this is my payroll in 2026. I'm ready to process week 5. I'm just going to click on Process Pay Run as I normally would and confirm my pay date. And when I click Next, you'll notice a new addition to this screen. So an APN notice will be retrieved as well as my RPNs. So I'm just going to continue, and then it'll prompt me to log in with my ROS certificate. So I'm just going to enter my details and click Continue. And you can see now that I've entered my details, as well as connecting to ROS to retrieve my updated RPN details, Payroll is now also connecting to NERSA to retrieve my APN notices. So it's going to do both things at the same time. You can see the latest APNs have been retrieved. So I've got a nice green tick there, as well as my RPN. So I'm going to continue on that. And this next screen will look a bit familiar, but again, there is a new addition to this page. So you can see, as well as my RPN information that Payroll has retrieved, I also have retrieved my APN information. So you can see there down at the bottom where it says APN, I have an employee, Wilma, she is active, and we can see that the employee and employer deduction of 1.5% has been applied. We'll move on to our edit pay section. Now you can see, if we look at Wilma as a first example, you can see the My Future Fund deduction has pulled through automatically on her pay screen. So we can see that right at the bottom there under deductions. Because you've applied the APN for Wilma, that will pull through automatically. So nothing else you need to do apart from retrieve the notification like we looked at in the earlier step. Now, if I just have a look at Vivian, Joseph, we can see the deduction there just down at the bottom. Now, if I was to add a bonus, remember it's based on gross pay, you can see that deduction for the pension increases. I'm going to continue with my payroll. Now again, a screen that most of you will recognise, but there are some additions. So I can see that I now have my pension on my employee pay breakdown. If I check a pay slip, just to see how that looks, you can see the My Future Fund deduction showing on the pay slip as well. Now we do also have a brand new report in the system. So you can see we have the My Future Fund contributions report. I'm just going to click to view an example of that report. And this is going to be really handy, especially in the early days, for you to keep track of those contributions. So it's going to give me my employee names, their PPS number, their status, and then their auto-enrolment information as well. Now, it will also give you totals, the gross pay, and the contributions as well. So going to be a really handy report, especially in the early days. So I'm happy with my pay run. I'm going to go ahead and complete. And what you'll notice, and you can see that in the information just at the top of this page. So once we enter our details for our ROS certificate, it will send our payroll submission to ROS as it normally would. But it's also going to send our pension submission over to NERSA. So again, something extra that's going to happen within the process. I'm going to go ahead and enter my password in and log in. And you can see in my submission section, just in the bottom right, as well as my payroll submission being transmitted to revenue, my pension submission is also being submitted to NERSA. So it's going to do both of those submissions at the same time. And you can see in our completed pay run page as well, you also have access to the contributions report if you do want to look back on it. So some handy new additions to help you keep on top of auto-enrolment in January. You can see my payroll submission has successfully been sent. And my pension submission has been sent across as well. Now, something I do just want to note with the pension submission is there is a deadline to this. You do want to have this submitted by 6:30 p.m. on the employee's pay date. So that is something to bear in mind. So that will be what the new process is going to look like in 2026 going forward. So, and as you can see, it's going to be really easy to manage that. So everything's going to be retrieved and submitted together. You just need to make sure you're entering your login details as normal. We've got a couple of handy new additions like the My Future Fund contributions report, which is going to be handy. So I would advise, saving a copy of that report every pay period, especially in these early days. So you as an employer can really keep track of those contributions. So that's it for the demonstration today. Now, I do want to wrap things up just by running through some common questions that we've been getting. So these are the most common questions that we've received about auto-enrolment so far. Obviously, it is brand new, so naturally everyone does have a lot of questions. So let's take a look at some of the more common ones. Now, question 1, when does auto-enrolment start if I pay in arrears? Now, auto-enrolment begins on the 1st of January, and deductions will apply based on the pay date, not when the work was done. So definitely something to bear in mind. If the pay date is on or after 1st of Jan, auto-enrolment rules will apply. Question 2, how do I register for auto-enrolment? Now, I did touch on this a bit earlier, but remember, employers must register on the My Future Fund portal, and you'll also set up your direct debit as well. Best to get on this as early as possible, just to make sure you've got everything in place in good time. Question 3, what if an employee already has a pension? So if the pension is processed through payroll and reported to revenue, then that employment will be exempt from auto-enrolment. Something to bear in mind, however, is if it's maybe a private pension and you don't process it through payroll, this will not mean they're exempt. So they will still be subject to auto-enrolment in that instance. Now, next up, can employees opt out and will I, as an employer, be refunded? So we did touch on this earlier again, but definitely a common question. Now, yes, employees can opt out, but remember that is only after 6 months of participation. Now, employer and state contributions do remain invested. So it is only the employee's own contribution that will be refunded if they choose to opt out. Now, next up, how do you handle multiple employments? Now, remember, eligibility is based on total earnings across all employments. So if an employee meets the criteria, they are actually enrolled in each eligible job. So definitely something to bear in mind if you've got employees with multiple jobs on your payroll. And question 3 on this page is, do I need to write to my employees to inform them about auto-enrolment? Now, answer this one. Yes, you will need to write to them, but welcome letters with all of this information will be available in your secure mailbox on the employer portal. So Nurse have made it really easy when it does come to the letters. All you need to do is download and send these letters to your employees. And that's just making sure you're then meeting your legal obligations. So yeah, Nurse have made that very straightforward when it comes to sending the letters out. But as always, for more details, I have included a link to auto-enrolment FAQs just down at the bottom of the slides there. So get those downloaded if you haven't already. So that brings us to the end of the content for today's webinar. I do want to finish things up by running through some further support. We have our help centre, so that is sage.ie/help. We have both our auto-enrolment and our payroll year-end hubs live on there now. So definitely a good time of year to get looking at those. We have our support guides on there. We have videos and information on how to get in touch with our support team if you need to. Hi again, everyone. I hope you've all enjoyed today's session. I will go ahead and close the session down in the next minute or so. As you exit, you will see a short survey. If you please take a moment to fill that out, your feedback is really valuable to us. We would love to hear what you thought, what works well, anything that can be improved so we can keep making these sessions even better for you. You will also receive a follow-up email later today. It will have a link to today's webinar recording on there and information on how to register for future sessions. But thanks again for joining us today. Hopefully we will see you again soon, but it is goodbye for now.